بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي جزاكم الله خير for the invite. Really do appreciate it. It's an honor for me to be in the presence of many of the young students here, and hopefully inshallah maybe in the future inshallah I'll get to see all of you again. Today I was asked to maybe speak a little bit about the story of Musa alayhi salam. Usually when it comes to stories, it's always very important to try and highlight some of the most important things that you can take away from something, especially a story. Because stories aren't just something that you narrate to each other at bedtime. You can do that if you want to, but I mean that's just one way of doing it. I mean the most important thing is that you are able to derive a benefit from it, so you can understand how this story relates to you as a person. Because when it comes to the story of Musa alayhi salam as an example, that's a story of many challenges. It's a story of overcoming challenges, and that's maybe something that many of you will always face, and that's something that you will always face in your life, in your lifetime. You will go through many challenges and you will go through many difficulties. Are you able to stand up and overcome and challenge and be a better version of yourself? Because you will make mistakes just like Musa alayhi salam also made a mistake. Because as you see in the story, Musa alayhi salam did something that maybe, I'm hoping many of you didn't do, which was kill somebody and murder someone. If he murdered somebody, how did somebody come back from doing something like that? How could you come back from something like that? And not just that, because he even said, if you read this chapter of the Quran, in Surah Shu'ara, which is the 26th chapter, he mentioned and he said, I killed somebody, and he said, فَفَرَرْتُ مِنْكُمْ لَمَا خِفْتُكُمْ فَوَهَبَ لِي رَبِّي حُكْمًا وَجَعَلَنِي مِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. Which means, I ran away out of fear because of the crime that I committed, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave me for what I did. And not only did He forgive me, alaykum assalam, but He made me and He bestowed upon me prophethood. So even after a mistake as a human being, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can still honor you. Even after doing a grievous or a horrible thing, you can still receive honor, and you can still be somebody who's even greater than you already are. There was a narration that was narrated by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, and he said something very interesting. This is going back to the tarikh and the history of the story of Musa. He said that Fir'aun ra'a fi nawmihi, or in his sleep he saw a dream, and he said he saw naran, he saw a fire, أحرقت بيوت القبطيين. He saw a fire that burned all of the house of the Egyptians. But the only thing that it didn't do is that it preserved all of the house of the Israelites. Now if you read history, you'd know that during the time of Yaqub alayhi salam, many of his descendants lived in Egypt, simply because of the fact there was a famine and there were so many things. And Yusuf alayhi salam, as a prophet, was somebody who had great prominence in Egypt. So in Egypt he became a politician and he became one of the advisors of the king. So he settled his family over there, and he had a very good relationship with the government who was there at that time. But circumstances change, not everything stays the same. So only after a few generations, somebody came in a position of power, took over, but he was very different from his predecessors. So this person who had a new title, he wasn't called a king, but he had a new title, which was Fir'aun or Pharaoh. He was somebody who saw that these people could be exploited and they could be used for economic leverage. And this is something that you see in all societies today. There's always going to be that population, whether they're a minority population or something else, there's always going to be somebody that you can exploit for an economic advantage. If that means that you have to suppress their human rights, that means that you have to suppress them as people, then so be it. You know, if it's going to give me money and it's going to make things better, then why not do it? You know, why care about the feelings of anybody? So that's what he did. And he mentioned, and he needed a justification, because in the past he did it. I mean, people would have said to him, there would have been people who said, there's no point of doing that, or you shouldn't do that. But he needed some kind of justification. So he mentioned that he saw a dream. Was this true or not? The narrations just mentioned Ibn Abbas's tradition tells us that's the dream that he had. It said that he had this dream and then he called in his people that he believed in. Because you have to understand that this is a society takes into consideration revelation. And dreams are something which is very powerful. Even today it's very powerful. Dreams can tell you what's going to happen in the future. Dreams can kind of give you a reflection of what your life is all about. There's so many different ways. You have visions, you have so many different things. So he saw something that was of grave concern to him. And the reason why it was of grave concern to him is because it meant that he could lose his power. So when he saw this dream, he asked those who were experts, and there's something, a science that they took very seriously. He said, how would I be able to interpret a dream which shows that there's a fire that's going to burn down all of the houses or the dwelling places of the Egyptians, but it's going to leave this community intact? And then he was told, oh, we'll tell you what that means. It means that you will not be in power anymore. You'll be evicted from power, and someone else is going to come from that community and they're going to overtake you. That's what it means. So then when he heard that, then he said, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to make sure that something like that doesn't ever happen and doesn't ever come to fruition. So when he woke up, obviously he was horrified. He gathered all of the priests, he gathered all of the magicians, and he asked them about the vision. And they said to him, this means that a boy or a person will be born from this family, meaning from Bani Israel or the Israelites, and he will be born of them, and the Egyptian people will perish at his hands. And then this is when Fir'aun ordered that every single male child from the Israelites were to be killed at birth, in infancy. And this was something which was a government policy. And you shouldn't really be surprised that why would a government do something so cruel? Because whenever anyone's interests is at stake, people will be more than ready to go and do something very grievous. This is something that's always happened in human history. And it continues to happen till this very day, and it will probably continue happening. So he found that this was going to be a threat, so he said, the only way I can make sure that this doesn't ever see the light of day is by making sure that every single male child that's ever born from this community is killed. It's okay, I don't mind the females living, but if the males all have to be killed. So then what happened was a decree was made, a government decree, that said every single child from this community is going to be killed. But then the experts and those who were the experts in in government policy and those who were his financial advisors and all of them, they said, but wait a second, this is a community that serves a lot of manpower. They're the one who do all the labor. If you're going to get rid of them, and remember that the Bani Israel at this time, okay, they were in bondage, so they were slaves. Okay, and this is something which is quite interesting. I always find, in which whenever we study topics like slavery or anything like that, we always assume that it's always associated with a certain color or a certain ethnicity or a certain race or something like that. But in reality, in human history, it's never been the case. And obviously these are sensitive topics that I don't want to really get into. But Bani Israel, or the Israelites, were a community in bondage. They were slaves in Egypt, which is very interesting, because the whole reason why what Musa alayhi salam was fighting for was for their emancipation. That's the whole point why he was saying let them go. And it was something that was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this teaches us that in the religion, or part of our religion as Muslims, is emancipation of slavery is something which is considered to be utmost importance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't allow, or God Almighty did not allow a community to be subject to slavery forever. And anything that they did suffer was a tribulation and was a test for them. But that was only up until a point in which they would be able to feed themselves. And this is something which is very important also to understand. So then, when Fir'aun took some advice from his financial, they said to him, these people bring all the money in. They bring the money in. They do the cheap labor. They do all of the hard work. If you decimate an entire population or you kill all of the male children, what that means is that we're going to suffer economically. So don't do something like that. So then he said, no, but look, I can't leave them like this. These people are a threat to me. And you have to always understand that no matter what happens, whenever somebody wants to justify a policy against any community, they'll always make them look like they're a threat. You need to understand that, because times change, okay? The policies never change, it always stays the same. And the wordings, in order to justify a suppression of any population or anything like that, you always use the same arguments. They're a threat, they're a danger, they're this and that, they're different. You know, they do these things differently, they do things like that. And that's a way in order to justify why anybody should be put down. And he said the same thing. So he said that this population over here, they're a threat to our existence. They're a threat to us as a people. They're a threat to my kingdom. So I can't leave them like this. I have to do something. So they came to an agreement and they said for 1 year, and this is mentioned in Ibn Kathir in his book Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, he says that they made a policy in which for 1 year he would leave alone all of the male children, and in another year, for an entire period of a year, he would decimate and he would kill every single male child. So for a whole year, every single male child will be left alone, because that for all of them are going to be designated in order to do all of the labor work. Those are the slaves. Before they were all slaves. But anyone who's born in the next day, the year after, is going to be killed. And that's how it's going to continue the cycle. So you always have a steady flow of certain people. But then it was a risk for him, Fir'aun, as a person. Why? Because the fruition of the dream that he had, that he was afraid of, it could come to pass, okay, which is exactly what happened in the year in which he was killing, or he wasn't killing, in the year that he wasn't killing the male children. But actually what happened is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes his decrees very interesting. This child was probably one of the few children, if any, that was born in the year, Musa alayhi salam was born in the year in which all of the children were supposed to be killed. But then it goes to show you that one lesson we can learn from it is, no matter what policy is out there, no matter how many enemies you may have, no matter how much obstacles that people try and put in your way, if it's not decreed to put you, it will never put you down. No matter what happens. Ultimately, your relationship with your Lord, that's the most important thing. How you conduct yourself with Allah and what He decides is more important. Not what anybody says. People might say to you, you can't do anything, you can't achieve anything, you're not powerful enough to do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. People put you down so many times. But reality is, they're not your Lord. They can't tell you what you are. They have no say in your life. They can't judge you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is your Lord. He's the only one who can judge you, and ultimately He's the only one who decides your fate, because He's the one who made you. That's exactly how it is. So then what happened was, he was born, Musa alayhi salam, during a year in which all the boys were to be slain. And she was afraid he would be slain, so she had to nurse him. The mother of Musa alayhi salam had to nurse him secretly. So imagine living in a time in which you were afraid that somebody was going to come into your house and snatch away your child and kill them. So that's the situation that she lived in. So she had to nurse him in secret. And that's what she did, up until a point in which it became a situation in which she couldn't hide him any longer. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this story in the introduction to Surah Al-Qisas, which is the 28th chapter of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, طاسين ميم تلك آيات الكتاب المبين نتلو عليك من نبأ موسى وفرعون بالحق لقوم يوقنون إن فرعون علا في الأرض وجعل أهلها شيعا يستضعف طائفة منهم يذبح أبناءهم ويستحيي نساءهم إنه كان من المفسدين. So what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran is that we recite to you the story of the news of Moses and Pharaoh in truth for a people who believe. Indeed, Pharaoh or Fir'aun exalted himself in the land, and turned the people into different sects and different communities, weakening a group and killing their children, their sons, and letting their females live. Indeed, he was one of those people who committed great crimes and sins. Very interesting that whenever any subjugation takes place, it always has to involve a segment of the population that's caused or that's made to go against another segment of the population. Because the ruling establishment, ultimately, they don't want eyes on them. So it's always going to have to be one section of the population against another. Always. That's how you instigate things. That's how it works. So this is what Fir'aun did. He was an expert. So he said to the people, this community here are a threat to all of us. We're all in danger because of this group of people. So you need to toe in line with what we do. He was in the ruling. So he was like, yeah, you have to toe in line. So that means that a huge segment of the population just became neutral and they allowed things to happen. So when people are always surprised, how could people do this? How was there a time in which 10 million people were killed in whatever here, or like, you know, a genocide there or something over there? Well, that's exactly how you do it. You numb a population so that they accept anything that they're told, and that's how it happens. That's how it works. So, and we wish to make a fair, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعِفُوا وَنَجَعَلُهُمُ الْأِمَّةَ وَنَجَعَلُهُمُ الْوَارِثِينَ, which means, but Allah Himself, God Almighty, He wished to do a favor for those who are weak and those who are oppressed in the land, and in turn to make them the rulers and to make them the inheritors. وَنُمَكِّنَ لَهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ, and to establish them. You know, Allah, there's another verse in the Quran which says, وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ, which means, and these are the days in which you alternate between people. A day might be where you are the one who's at the bottom, but another day you might be at the top. Circumstances change for people. Don't assume that the situation that you find yourself in today will determine your tomorrow. Your tomorrow could be very different from your today. 10 years from now, who knows where you'll be? You might be in a much better situation than you've ever been in before. Don't ever assume things about your Lord. Don't ever assume things at all. You just don't know. Life is so unpredictable. But you always think the best, and you always assume the best. You know, you had a situation in which there was a people who were in bondage, literally considered to be the lowest people on earth. Here in the story of Musa and Fir'aun, Bani Israel were a despised community. There were people who were looked down upon. This is the reality. This is their situation. But then only a few years later, they were the ones who inherited the land. They were the ones who were considered to be the ones who everybody wanted to be like. They were the ones who had prophets and messengers that came from their community. This teaches us many things. Always be patient. In another verse in the Quran, Allah says, لَمَّا صَبَرُوا. This was a gift because of their patience. You can gain with patience and perseverance that which you'd never be able to gain with so many different ways. Being patient and improving upon yourself, that's the biggest stab that you can give to anybody who has any issue with you. Let them see how good you're doing. Let them see how much you've changed as a person. You know, it's easy to swear back at someone. It's easy to insult somebody when somebody insults you. That's the easiest thing you can do. But when you ignore all of that, and you focus on yourself, and you develop yourself as a person, if there is anybody in this world who's envious against you, that's the biggest slap on the back that you can give them. And you haven't really done anything to them in reality. That's the amazing thing about it. But you just focused on what is important to you and what should be important to you. So this is what Musa a.s. came to teach his people. And this is the reason why he wanted to take them away from the predicament that they were in. When Musa a.s. was born, he was born in a situation in which his mother had to hide him. But he died as a community, as a leader of an entire community. He died as somebody who emancipated an entire nation of people from slavery. That's how he died. How was he born and how he died are two completely different circumstances and two things which don't even come together. But that's where you come in, and that's where your spiritual growth comes. That's where the hard work comes in. What are you willing to do, inshallah, in order to improve yourself? What are you willing to do in order to have a good relationship with your Lord? It's not easy. If anybody tells you it's easy to change yourself, that's not true. It's very difficult. There's a book written by Imam al-Ghazali, and he mentions something quite interesting. He says one of the most difficult things a person could ever do is change himself or herself. And he even said, you might reach an age in your life, and a human being will reach a certain age in their lives when they're not able to do any changes to themselves whatsoever, meaning you'll be set in your ways. And he said some of the early people, or those who had wisdom, they said that might be the age of 40. Some they say probably maybe 45, maybe 50, maybe 55, maybe 60. And the only reason why they mentioned the age is not, the only reason why that is mentioned is because it encourages you and I to start working on ourselves from today. One thing that you will always see is, and you'll always notice from the story of Musa AS, is he wasn't really somebody who was blaming anybody. He wasn't blaming his predicaments or the predicaments of his people on others. That's something which is very easy to do. But he understood that this was a tribulation. He understood that this was a test. And he understood that this was about him and the people more than it was about what somebody else was doing to them. So there's also an element that we all need to understand, is that whenever we go through any difficulties in life or any challenges, sometimes we need to point the finger at ourselves and we need to look at ourselves. What am I doing that's wrong? When the Muslims lost at Uhud, people would say, oh, their strategy wasn't good. Oh, you know, they disobeyed the messenger because he told them to stand on the mountain Jabal al-Ruma, but they descended and they disobeyed the commandments that was given to them. But then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressed the matter or addressed the issue in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said something very different. He didn't say your strategy was bad. He didn't mention that the way you acted was improper. He said, قُلْ هُوَ مِنْ عِنْدِ أَنفُسِكُمْ. It was from the reason why you were defeated came from you. You were at fault. It was from you. And another verse, مِنْكُمْ مَنْ يُرِيدُ الدُّنْيَا وَمِنْكُمْ مَنْ يُرِيدُ الْآخِرَةِ. There was a segment that were only vying for the glitter and the glamour of the world, because when they saw the spoils, that's all that they were running towards. All they wanted was the money. And all they wanted was they thought everything was finished and that's it. They were running after the money. Money is very harmful if you're not going to do anything good with it. If it's all for just show and all just to improve yourself and your life and all of that, and all for glitter and all for glamour and fame, and these are the things that people love the most and they really want. But it doesn't improve you spiritually. In fact, it might even be a cause for you to commit suicide. As you know, some things that have been going on sometimes. Don't think that fame and all of that kind of stuff is something which will make you improve as a person or will give you that satisfaction or that gratification that you need, because that's not the case. Musa alayhi salam, his mother took him as a baby and put him in a basket in the Nile River, because that's what she was ordered to do. And this goes to show you that she must have been a woman who had a really good relationship with her Rabb, with her Lord. Because for somebody to do something like that or make some kind of that level of sacrifice, to put your trust in somebody else, meaning your Lord, to be able to do something like that, it shows that you have to have a lot of conviction. You have to be somebody of great faith. Otherwise, you'd never be able to do that. Most of us are not willing to even trust anything small, let alone anything significant. Something even insignificant, we're not ready to trust anybody else with it. Even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in reality. It shows that we don't have much conviction. But if you do have conviction, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never fail you. Where were you when you were born? When you were born and you came into this earth, you survived up until now, meaning that there was a point in time when you didn't know anything, but there was somebody who was taking care of you. You were brought into existence. Up until this time, you were somebody who was taken care of. You were somebody who was nurtured in some way, whatever whatever the case may have been. For you to have reached up until the age that you've reached now, up until this very day, it means that all of your provisions you received, all of everything that you needed in order to survive, you gained. Everything that you could have ever required up until this very point, you had. But how many people are grateful then for that which they have? Allah says in the Quran, وَلَئِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. if you are grateful to Allah, indeed your Lord, He will give you even more. So then she put the basket into the Nile, and then very ironically, the child ended up in the hands of the person that it was supposed to run away from. It goes to show you, life is all about irony. Now, Musa, the whole point of putting the child in the basket was so that Fir'aun couldn't lay a hand on Musa. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took Musa to Fir'aun. So who was the one who picked up the child? The wife of Fir'aun. And then when she picked her up, she mentioned وَقَالَتِ امْرَأَةُ فِرْعَوْنَ قُرَّةُ عَيْنٍ لِي وَلَكَ لَا تَقْتُلُوهُ عَسَىٰ أَن يَنْفَعَنَا أَوْ نَتَّخِذَهُ وَلَدًا وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. She mentioned and she said, do not kill the child, perhaps they may be a benefit to us, or maybe we can adopt him as a son, or adopt him as a son. Because she couldn't have children on her own, as many of the accounts mention. So when she saw a child, obviously her motherly instincts came out and she wanted to adopt the child as her own. And that's what she did. And obviously Fir'aun couldn't have much of a say after that when she made that decision. So then she summoned, because she was the queen, she summoned witnesses to come, because Musa alayhi salam was not accepting anyone's breast at all. So she employed people to come and breastfeed Musa, but he was not accepting anyone. And this was from Allah's wisdom, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised Musa's mother that إِنَّا رَادُوهُ إِلَيْكِ وَجَاعِلُهُ مِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ, which means that indeed he will be returned back to you. Do this, but he will come back to you. And then Musa alayhi salam's sister, who was observant of the child and was watching him all the way until he was picked up by the people of Fir'aun, or the family of Fir'aun, she made a suggestion, and she went into the palace and she made a suggestion, and she said, if you're looking for anyone who can serve as a suckling mother, I know somebody who would be able to do that, and she doesn't even need that much of a payment. She can do it and it's not a problem. And then they said, if you know anybody, if you have any suggestions, please bring it. And then she called her mother. And then Musa alayhi salam recognized his mum, and he was, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him his mother back. So this is a situation in which Musa alayhi salam had to be abandoned at birth, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reunited him with his mother. And this is something that can happen to many of us. You might lose something in this dunya or in this world, but you might get something better than that. Or you might get that very thing that you lost. There's a verse in the Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنْ يَعْلَمِ اللَّهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ خَيْرًا يُؤْتِكُمْ خَيْرًا مِمَّا أُخِذَ مِنْكُمْ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Which means, if God Almighty knows that there's good in your hearts, if He knows that there is good in your hearts, He will replace that which He's taken away from you. Because we all have things that are taken away from us. If there's good in our hearts, He will give you back that which was taken away from you. And not only that, He will also be pleased with you because He will forgive you. And indeed, He is all merciful, all forgiving and all merciful. So there's nothing in this dunya that cannot be replaced. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows our hearts. And He knows the state of our hearts. And if Allah wants to give us something and replace something, He can do that easily. You lost something, no problem. You get something better in return. But how do you react and how you behave, okay, and how you carry yourself, that's a decision that we make. So Musa alayhi salam's mother, because she was patient, Allah mentions this in the Quran, وَأَصْبَحَ فُؤَادُ أُمِّ مُوسَى فَارِغًا. The heart of Musa's mother, she wavered. Her heart wavered and it shook. She was about to tell everybody, okay, I'm the mother of this child, which would have incriminated her, because it would have meant that she is she's the mother of a child of Bani Israel, and it's a year in which they were supposed to be killed. So he would have been killed. Allah says in the Quran, لَوْلَا أَرَّبَطْنَا عَلَى قَلْبِهَا لِتَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Had it not been for the fact that we have to strengthen her conviction so that she can be somebody who's a true believer. So her heart wavered, but she was given strength. Okay? And sometimes that's all we really need, because we can waver. Sometimes it's very easy to wave by, sometimes very easy to drift away. These are very easy things that can happen to any of us. Sometimes all we really need is for somebody, especially our Lord, okay, to give us, to strengthen our conviction so that we can go through with whatever challenges life throws our way. Because this was one of the biggest challenges and difficulties that she went through. And then obviously, alhamdulillah, by Allah's grace and mercy, she was able to breastfeed him and to be his wet nurse and get paid at the same time. She was getting paid for breastfeeding her own biological son. Now imagine that. So not only do you get something back, but you get more. If you show patience, you show perseverance, you'll always end up winning. Whatever life throws away, you'll always end up beating that challenge, and you'll always end up winning. You will get more than what you lost. You will gain more than anything that was taken away from you. This is standard, and this is a principle. Okay, the universe that we have or that we inhabit was created with certain laws, and these laws will never change. A challenge comes your way, you improve, okay, you become better, you overcome, and you are the one on top. All of you are university students here. In order for you to overcome the challenge that you find yourselves in now, you need to learn, you need to study. It's a lot of work, but then at the end, you win. You overcame. You did what you needed to. You did what you needed to be done, and it was done. At that point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, وَلَمَّا بَلَغَ أَشُدَّهُ وَاسْتَوَى آتَيْنَاهُ حُكْمًا وَعِلْمًا وَكَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And when he attained his full strength, he grew up, okay? He became a young person, he attained his full strength, and he became mustawa, he became somebody who was upright. Then we bestowed upon him good judgment and knowledge. وَكَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And this is the way that we reward people who do good. If you're somebody who is always focusing on doing things which is pleasing to your Lord, you will gain good judgment, and you will be somebody who will be bestowed with knowledge. So you'll be somebody who is wise, and you will be taken care of also in that regard. But something interesting happened to Musa alayhi salam. And this is something that would have changed his entire life. For many people, this would be the end maybe, or this would be a point of no return. But for him it was just the beginning, and sometimes that's how it is. Sometimes the darkest moments in your life could be the thing that you need to spring forward. It springs forth from you a new blossom. You become a new human being after coming into contact with a dark chapter in your own life. Because Musa alayhi salam, he was put in a situation which he never even intended to be in, but he was put in that situation, and he ended up killing somebody, which was very interesting. So one day what happened was, he saw two people fighting. One of the people was from Bani Israel, and the other one was an Egyptian. Not only was he an Egyptian, he was actually from many of the Mufassirin. If you read the tafsir, they mentioned that he was actually from the family of Fir'aun. He was actually from his close family. So then they were fighting, and then the person from Bani Israel recognized Musa alayhi salam, and he said, "Please help me and assist me." And then Musa alayhi salam went, and he pushed the other person back, meaning the Egyptian back. But Musa alayhi salam maybe didn't recognize his own strength. He pushed him and he fell down and he passed away. But reality is, from a blow like that, a person wouldn't really in any normal circumstance, a person. So this was a test. He fell down and he passed away and he died. And then when this happened, he realized what he did, and then the first thing that he did was he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. When we make mistakes or when we sin, are we that reflective as human beings in which whenever something bad happens to us, we ask Allah for forgiveness? No matter the circumstances, however difficult they may be, however disastrous our decisions might have led us, are we ready to acknowledge that we made a mistake? One of the reasons why Iblis was considered to be the worst of creation was because he didn't acknowledge his sin. It's very different when you don't acknowledge your own mistake that you've done and you don't hold yourself to account, as opposed to when you do. Because when you do, you've recognized the mistake that you've done, and then later on you repent. That was the only difference between Adam and Iblis, if you actually think about it. The only difference between them is that Iblis didn't acknowledge, but Adam, he did acknowledge. So Adam acknowledged that he made a mistake, and he was ready to repent, and that's what he did. So he did repent. Musa alayhi salam, the first thing he did was make tawbah, and he literally repented to his Lord, and he said, Astaghfirullah, Rabbi ghfirli, oh my Lord, forgive me. So he asked for forgiveness. And whatever consequences that might have come after that, no problem. So long as I make my peace with my Lord. That was the most important thing. If I have peace with Allah and for what I've done, I'm ready to accept any of the consequences that may happen. And that's what happened. So when he killed this person, his heart was filled with deep sorrow, and immediately he begged his Lord for forgiveness. He did not intend to kill the man. He pleaded with his Lord to forgive him, and he felt a sense of peace filling his whole being, because that's the reality. But when you make tawbah and you ask your Lord for forgiveness, you submit to whatever consequence. I mean, if you did that, then you know you made a mistake, and you recognize what you did. You're at peace with yourself, at least. Whatever may happen to you, at least you're at peace with yourself. But Iblis is not at peace with himself at all, because he didn't acknowledge the sin, which is why he's going to be in that state until the Day of Judgment, as mentioned in the Quran. And Musa alayhi salam, at this point, he wasn't in hiding, which was very interesting, because he did not realize people were talking about it and people knew what happened. So the next day came, and then he saw the same person from his own community fighting somebody else. And then Musa alayhi salam said to him, إِنَّكَ لَغَوِيٌّ مُبِينٌ. You're definitely a troublemaker. I saw you fighting yesterday, and you're fighting again today. You're somebody who's just here to cause trouble. فَلَمَّا أَنْ أَرَادَ أَنْ يَبْطِشَ بِالَّذِي هُوَ عَدُوٌّ لَهُمَا. When he was about to come and stop them too, the tafasir say that the one from his own community said, Oh Musa, تريد أن تقتلني كما قتلت نفسا بالأمس. You want to kill me now just like you killed that person before. The other person heard. So it was you who killed that person. Meaning Musa, you're the one who was responsible. So then he went and he told all of the police and all of the enforcement and all of the enforcement officers and everything else and soldiers and everybody. Musa was the one who killed. It was Musa who did it. So at that point, everybody knew it was Musa who killed this person, who was a prominent person from the family of Fir'aun. I mean, you can't do a worse crime than that in reality, if you think about it. You murdered somebody, and this person wasn't just anybody. This person was somebody who was extremely prominent from the family, from the close quarters of Fir'aun himself. At that point, somebody came to Musa and somebody said to him, فَخْرُجَ إِنِّي لَكَ مِنَ النَّاصِحِينَ. You need to get out of this place, meaning out of Egypt. I'm just going to be extremely sincere in my advice to you, because they want to kill you. إِنَّ الْمَلَأَ يَأْتَمِرُونَ بِكَ لِيَقْتُلُوكَ. The government and everybody in power, they're out to kill you. You will be apprehended and you will be arrested and you will be killed. You will be trialed and you'll be killed. So get out while you still can. فَخَرَجَ مِنْهَا خَائِفًا يَتَرَقَّبُ. The Quran says that then he was shaking Musa alayhi salam, and he ran out of Egypt. He literally ran out with nothing except the clothes on his back. Nothing except the clothes on his back. Now let's think about this for a little bit, because how many tests did we go through in life? Especially one that's similar to this. How many dark points did we go through in life that we can say that it's similar to Musa alayhi salam, where we accidentally killed somebody, where it wasn't even intentional, and you have an entire country that's going out for your neck to kill you, and you are forced to leave somewhere where that's the only place you ever knew in your entire life, You have to understand that Musa alayhi salam, he was born in privilege. When I say privilege, I don't mean the fact that he was born in secret. But when he went to the palace of Fir'aun, he had privilege in the sense that he himself personally was growing up with everything that he needed. He was literally living in the palace of Fir'aun. Everything he needed was there. From riches to rags is what Musa alayhi salam went through. But that's the point. See, the riches will come again, but this is your test in life. You might have had something, you might be in a good situation today, tomorrow you'll be down in the dumps. Tomorrow you might be down in the dumps. You might not have nothing to your name. You might be bankrupt. You might have nothing. You might have nobody left around you. Friends, loved ones, all of that, all gone. How do you build up from that point on? Because that's what Musa alayhi salam went through. Everybody, all his family, by this time his family, his mother was passed away. He had one brother left in Egypt. His father passed away even before then. His people were in bondage in Egypt. And he was riches, and then he went to rags, and he went and he became an exile and he became a refugee in an area known as Midian. So Midian is an area or a locality. It's not really called that now. It's between Egypt, it's towards the Sinai Peninsula. So it's between what's Palestine and Egypt today. So it's very interesting what happened to Fir'aun, to Musa, alayhi salam. And then at this point, he went, and after much walking and struggling, hunger, thirst, and everything you could imagine, he sat down under a tree and he made a supplication, which is a good supplication to memorize because this might help you in the future. He said, Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khairin faqir, which means, my Lord, anything you can give me today, anything that you could give me, I'm in the poorest state that I've ever been in. Inni lima anzalta ilayya min khair, any good that can come my way, I'm destitute. I'm desperate. That's what the point that he was in at that moment. And always be nice, because even during your difficult times, don't feel like you can't be a source of benefit to other people just because you're going through difficulties. Musa alayhi salam was at literally the lowest point in his life at this time. Yet when he saw people who needed help, he was there straight away. He was there for people. So at this point in time, he saw that there were people who were flocking their animals and they're watering their animals. Anybody who knows this kind of lifestyle, you know what I'm talking about. So you take the animals and you take them to the pasture and you go to water them and everything else. So you saw some people who were living as nomads. They were going to flock their sheep and their animals. But then he noticed that there were two women and everybody there was too many people. So he didn't have enough time. He saw that they were struggling in order just to take their animals to the wells and to water them. So he offered to help. He could have just sat down and he could have said, yeah, I'm going through my own struggles in life. Why do I give a damn about anybody else? Why do I care? I've got my own issues. I've got my own problems. But that wasn't his mentality. And that's something which we can learn from. By helping other people, by helping others, it brings out the best in you, and that will be a cause for you to overcome the challenges and the difficulties that you find yourself in. Through those acts of kindness and consideration to other people, that's maybe all that you need. That's maybe all that you really need. Maybe that's all that's important. Once that happens to you, then everything else just becomes fine at that point. Everything else. There was a supplication that was made. If anybody studies the life of the Prophet ﷺ, there was a story that happened during his life when he went to Taif. Taif is a town in the Hijaz region, and it's a hilly area, so it's a mountainous region. He went there when his uncle passed away. So his uncle passed away. He didn't have any more protection. In those days, you needed jiwar. Jiwar is somebody to protect. You need a system that will protect you. And if that system goes, then that means that anybody can just come along and do whatever they want to you. And his uncle passed away, which means his protection was gone now. Anybody from the Quraysh could do anything they wanted. So he assumed that it might have been a good idea to go to a town called At-Ta'if, not too far away, not too far from Mecca. And then he went to At-Ta'if in order to seek assistance from the people who were there, the tribe of Thaqif. But then they were not receptive to him at all. And obviously many of you know the story. They pelted him, they did so much harm. It was probably the worst day in his life, alayhi salatu wasalam. And then he said, when he made this application, he said something very interesting. He said, alayhi salatu wasalam, "Oh my Lord, if so long as you're not displeased with me, I don't mind. So long as this was a manifestation, if this is not a manifestation of your displeasure with me, I have no problem going through these difficulties." Because he understood that difficulties makes you a better person. It changes you as a person. You become a much better version of yourself through these difficulties. So Musa alayhi salam went and he went to assist these even though he didn't know them. There was no beneficial gain for himself. He wasn't getting any money out of it. There was nothing there was no incentive whatsoever to be kind, but he did it anyway. So that's what happened. So when he went there, he watered their sheep for them on their behalf. And then he said to them, "Here you go." And then he went back to the tree that he was reclining in, and there he was just making supplications to his Lord. And then at that point, these two women, their father was very old and frail. Some people do mention, if you read the commentaries on the Quran, some mention that he was actually a prophet himself. Some days they say he was Shu'aib, but that's not something which is actually verified. Allahu A'lam. The point is, whatever the case may be, he was somebody who was known to be a righteous person. He was somebody of great wisdom. And he was surprised when they returned early, because he was expecting that it would take some time. But then they mentioned that somebody came and then he helped us. And then he wanted to give that person a wage. Because even though he was old, frail and very weak, he had some money. He was quite wealthy. So he said, "I am more than willing to give this person a payment for the act of kindness that even though that wasn't in his interest." But it goes to show you, if you have a good intention, you will always win at the end. You'll always get something. You're looked after. Consider yourself somebody who's taken care of. Consider yourself somebody who's looked after. So Musa alayhi salam, they came to him and they said, "Inna abi yad'uka liyajziyaka ajra ma saqayta lana." Indeed, my Lord, he came. My father is calling you so that he can give you a payment for the act of kindness that you did for us. And Musa alayhi salam went there and then he had a conversation with this person, with the father, and then he was so pleased when he saw Musa alayhi salam was somebody who was a righteous person. He noticed that he was somebody of great virtue. He noticed that there was a lot of nobility in his characteristics. He said that this is a person, إِنِّي أُرِيدُ أَنْ أُنْكِحَكَ إِحْدَى بَنَتَيَّ هَاتَيْنِ عَلَىٰ أَنْ تَأْجُرَنِي ثَمَانِيَ حِجَجٍ. I'm not going to take too long, inshallah, because I know this is a long story and I don't think we're going to get it done this evening. But at this point, it's mentioned that he married one of the daughters of the person, some people call Shu'aib. And then he was living there for 10 years. Now these 10 years were very important. There's a reason why Imam al-Ghazali in his book, if you read his book, Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, he mentions that sometimes you need to take a couple of years away just to find yourself. And that's something which is really important. Because sometimes in life, you need to just withdraw, take some time out, and try and find. You can be engaged in so many things, yet lose yourself. And that's something which many of us do today, because so many of us were on social media, maybe. Some of us we're in uni, we're doing this, we're doing that. We very much forget ourselves. Allah mentioned in the Quran, لا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم. Don't be like those people who forgot their Lord, so they forgot themselves. Imagine. Sometimes you need to withdraw in order to find yourself again. So that's what Musa alayhi salam, that was the period, this period of 10 years wasn't just a period of 10 years where he was just living large or anything like that, but these were 10 years of reflection. These were 10 years in which Musa alayhi salam was reflecting. These were 10 years of contemplation. These were 10 years of devotion. This was a spiritual reconnection. So it led to a spiritual rebirth. He became a new person. The same person who left running away from Egypt wasn't the same person when Musa alayhi salam went back to Egypt. In some of the tafasir, if you read it, it mentions that Musa wanted to go back. He wanted to go back to Egypt, and he wanted to confront, and he wanted to state his case. And he was ready for the consequences. He was ready for the consequences. Even though he said when he was commissioned and and his Lord appeared to him and spoke to him, Inni ana Allahu Rabbul Alameen. He was fetching for his family, and then he had a revelation from his Lord. Inni ana Allahu Rabbul Alameen. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the confidence that he needed to be able to go back. That's what goes to show us that many a times we do need strength given to us by our Lord for many things. And that's all we really need. If we have that, that's all we need. I'm telling you, if you really have that connection, you really have that relationship, that's all you need in life. You don't need anything else. The whole world turns against you, you'll still be confident enough to be able to implement what you want to do. And you'll be justified in doing so. That's what happened to him. So he went back to Fir'aun. At this point, he went back to Egypt. But only after he was given that encouragement by his Lord. After that initial encouragement, then he felt that he can go and confront his demons or his ghosts, i.e. go back to the place or the source of the trauma that he had in his life, which was Egypt. And when he went there, where did he go? He went straight to Fir'aun. And even so much so that Fir'aun himself was shocked and surprised at how on earth could he show himself over here again after what he did. And then Fir'aun said to him, أَلَمْ نُرَبِّكَ فِينَا وَلِيدًا وَلَبِثْتَ فِينَا مِنْ عُمْرِكَ سَنِينَ. Did I not personally take care of you from your childhood? وَفَعَلْتَ فَعْلَتَكَ الَّتِي فَعَلْتَ وَأَنْتَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. And then you did an act which was so disgraceful when you killed somebody, and you were from the people who were very ungrateful. You were an ungrateful person, Fir'aun said to Musa. And then Musa said, فَعَلْتُهَا إِذًا. I did it then. Me, I'm a different person. فَعَلْتُهَا إِذًا وَأَنَا مِنَ الضَّالِينَ. I did it then when I was completely lost. فَوَهَبَ لِي رَبِّي حُكْمًا وَجَعَلَنِي مِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. And then my Lord gave me inspiration and made me into one of the messengers. So he was explaining how he was a very different person now to the person that he was then. And even then, did he need to state the case? Because he understood the fact that it was by accident. When he killed the Egyptian person, he understood that that was an accident. He didn't do it on purpose. This is why he said to Allah, إِنِّي قَتَلْتُ مِنْهُمْ نَفْسًا فَأَخَافُ أَنْ يَقْتُلُونَ. My Lord, I killed one of them, and I'm afraid that they may harm me. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, no, do not be afraid. Go and speak to him. So sometimes we should confront the things that scare us the most, because that was the thing that Musa was really afraid of. But the answer and the solution was to confront that which scares you. Sometimes we have so many fears in life. Maybe the answer isn't to always run away. Why do we always run away all the time? Maybe the answer is to try and actually understand why those fears are there and maybe confront it. And maybe that's where the healing is. The healing might be in confronting those fears. Maybe that's what we need to do. Once we're able to do that, then maybe that's when we overcome. And there's so many lessons really from the story of Musa alayhi salam. So I could be going on, but I do understand that we started a bit late, and I think Ledan also mentioned to me that there was going to be like a question and answer session.